The bamboo walls of the small home in Kibawe trembled with the morning breeze, and somewhere in the dimness, under the soft flicker of a candle, a mother knelt on a straw mat. Her name was Manny Pacquiao, and every morning before the sun fully rose, she whispered the same prayer. Not for fortune, not even for herself, but for her children to make it through one more day without hunger or sickness or despair. Outside, the roosters crowed as the first light filtered through the cracks, revealing a house worn by time, by storms, by grief. Manny watched her sometimes quietly from the doorway. At 12 years old, he had already learned how to walk softly. He knew when not to make noise. He knew how to disappear when the house was heavy with silence. That morning, like many others, he left early. The small tray of donuts balanced on one hand, he weaved through the muddy streets with the instinct of someone twice his age. He had learned how to sell, how to smile at strangers, how to hold back tears when they pushed him away. But on that particular day, something inside him shifted. Maybe it was the way his mother didn't look at him when he said goodbye. Maybe it was how he caught a glimpse of his father, running off with another woman, their fingers interlocked like lovers escaping judgment. Manny stood frozen, not because it was a surprise, but because it wasn't. He had felt it coming. The absences, the arguments, the strange scent on his father's shirt. And in that moment, at only 12 years old, he made a decision. He would never tell his mother what he saw. The secret was born there. It wasn't heavy yet. It didn't scream. It simply sat at the bottom of his chest, like a stone dropped in a deep well. He thought maybe it would stay there forever. When his father left, he didn't leave a note. He didn't leave money or food. He left a gap, a brutal, echoing hole in a house already missing too much. Dionysia didn't cry in front of the children. She simply worked harder, prayed longer. She told Manny to focus on school, on being a good boy. But Manny couldn't pretend. He started fighting. In the streets, behind school buildings, anywhere someone threw the first punch. He fought for food. He fought for respect. He fought to feel something stronger than the shame building inside him. At night, when the candles burned low, he wrote letters to his mother, letters he never gave her. In one he wrote, "Ma, I saw him. I saw what he did. But I didn't tell you because I thought maybe it would break you." He folded the paper, placed it under his mat, and prayed she would never find it. At 15, he left home. Not with pride, but with desperation. He told Dionysia he was going to Manila to box, to send money, to be a man. But the truth was darker. He couldn't bear to stay in that house, in those mornings, in that silence. He boarded a ship with nothing but old boxing gloves, torn shoes, and the secret he still hadn't told her. In Manila, Manny learned what it meant to be alone. He slept in parks, under bridges, in the corners of gyms that smelled of sweat and regret. He trained with the fury of someone with no plan B, and every time his fists connected with a bag, with an opponent, he imagined he was punching away the memory of his father's back turned to him. He imagined erasing that day, erasing the look on his mother's face if she ever found out. It was in a rundown gym in Sampaloc, where he met Buboy Fernandez. Buboy wasn't famous, he wasn't rich, but he saw something in Manny that others didn't. He didn't ask too many questions. He gave him water, wrapped his hands, taught him timing. And in the quiet moments between fights, Manny told Buboy parts of the truth. Never the whole thing, never the exact words, just pieces, enough for Buboy to understand that there was a reason Manny never talked about his father, a reason he never let his mother visit him in the city. As his talent grew, so did his reputation. Small fights became televised bouts. Promoters started paying attention. Reporters came around, asking about his childhood, his family, his motivations. Manny always smiled, always said the same things. "My mother is a strong woman. She taught me to fight with faith." It was true in part, but it was also a mask, because in the letters he kept writing and never sending, he said other things. "I don't know if I'll ever be strong enough to tell you. Maybe one day, when I'm somebody." By 18, he was already being called a prodigy. His punches were fast, cruel, poetic. People came to see the boy with fire in his eyes. They didn't see the shadows under them. They didn't know that every win came with guilt, that every trip home was shorter, that even as he bought food and paid bills, he avoided eye contact with the woman who raised him because he couldn't bear the thought of her knowing the truth. Back in General Santos, Dionysia prayed harder than ever. She lit candles not just for her son's safety, but because she felt something she couldn't name. A distance. A wall. A wound she hadn't caused but couldn't seem to reach. Sometimes she asked Manny simple questions. "Is there something you're not telling me?" And he always laughed it off. He would touch her hand, kiss her forehead and say, "I'm just tired, Ma." But the truth was, the secret was no longer a stone. It had grown into a weight he carried into the ring, into interviews, into every public smile. He feared not her anger, but her heartbreak. He feared that if she looked at him the same way she used to, with that unshakable faith, and then found out what he had hidden, maybe that look would vanish forever. In those early years of fame, Manny built a legend, but he also built a wall. Not just from the public, but from the one person who loved him before he was anything, before the crowds, before the titles, before the world cared. He kept her close, yet always at arm's length. He gave her gifts, built her a house, but never gave her the truth. And so the first chapter of his legend wasn't written with belts or trophies. It was written in silence, in the spaces between what he said and what he couldn't, in the prayers of a mother who believed in him more than he believed in himself, and in the quiet ache of a son who had learned to fight everyone, except the memory of what he saw that morning, 25 years ago, when he chose to carry the pain alone. The lights were blinding now. The cheers thundered like waves crashing in a stadium of roaring oceans. By 2008, Manny Pacquiao wasn't just a fighter. He was a global icon, a champion across multiple weight divisions, a name that transcended borders. His hands had become symbols of Filipino pride, his smile a signature of humble strength. And yet, for all the cameras pointed at him, none of them captured what lived behind his eyes when he was alone. No championship belt could cover the truth he still hadn't told his mother. In hotel rooms after victories, when the adrenaline faded and the celebrations dimmed, Manny would sit by the window, staring into the night sky. He had everything now: cars, mansions, bank accounts with numbers he couldn't have imagined when he was selling donuts in General Santos. But the boy inside him still held the same silence he had clutched as a teenager. "I never told her. She still doesn't know." The press asked about his past constantly. Journalists wanted to romanticize his rise, from poverty to legend, from slums to stardom. Manny gave them what they wanted: a rehearsed story about hard work and faith, his mother's strength, his nation's hope. But he never added the missing piece. He never told them about the morning he saw his father walk away. He never told them how that moment hollowed something in him that even glory couldn't refill. At this stage in his life, Manny was surrounded by people: handlers, trainers, sponsors. But only one person truly understood the silence between his words: Boo-Boy Fernandez. They had grown up together in the ring, and Boo-Boy had seen how the victories didn't lighten Manny's heart, the way people assumed. After the fight with Oscar De La Hoya, one of the most defining wins of his career, Manny sat in his locker room, bruised but victorious, and said to Boo-Boy, "They think I'm a god now, but I still can't talk to my own mother." Boo-Boy didn't reply. He didn't have to. Dionysia was always present in the narrative. TV cameras loved her eccentricity, her dances, her fiery prayers ringside. She became a character in the legend of Manny Pacquiao. But behind the TV persona, she was a mother still waiting for something she didn't even know was missing. She saw her son building churches, entering politics, transforming into a national savior. But sometimes when they were alone, she would ask gently, "Why do you look away when I ask about your father?" And Manny would smile, shift topics, offer gifts, always gifts. Their faith should have brought them closer. Both believed in God with intensity. But over time, even that became a quiet point of tension. Manny's spiritual transformation, his decision to become a born-again Christian, was something Dionysia didn't understand. She was a devout Catholic, raised in ritual and rosaries. When Manny began preaching about personal redemption, sin, and new beginnings, she watched with cautious eyes. He invited her to his services. She came once, sat in the back, left early. One night after a sermon, He called her. His voice trembled more than usual. "Ma," he said, "do you think people can carry guilt for too long?" There was silence on the other end. Then her voice, soft but firm. "Only if they believe God can't forgive them." He wanted to tell her then. He even began, "There's something I've never said to you," but she interrupted, laughing slightly, thinking he was about to talk about a boxing injury or another political move. The moment passed, and he let it. Years went by. Victories kept stacking, so did expectations. Manny wasn't just a boxer anymore, he was a senator, a voice of the people, a spiritual leader. Every word he said was measured, every appearance dissected. But nothing compared to the weight of the one truth he had never spoken aloud to the one person who mattered most. The closest he came was after his loss to Juan Manuel Marquez in 2012. That knockout wasn't just physical. It cracked something internal. Lying on the canvas, he felt exposed, not just to the world, but to his own ghosts. For days after the fight, he barely spoke. He returned to General Santos for a rare, quiet visit. No media, no entourage, just him and his mother, sitting on the porch of the house he had built for her. She made coffee, he didn't drink it. She asked how he was feeling. He didn't answer. For a moment their eyes met, and in that fragile space between question and confession, he almost told her everything. "Ma," he began, "there's something I saw when I was 12, something I should have told you." Her hand reached for his, ready for the rest. But then a relative called from inside. She turned her head for a second, and the moment shattered. He never finished the sentence. She never brought it up again. As he entered his mid-30s, the physical toll of boxing became harder to ignore. His body healed slower. His reflexes, once supernatural, were just human. Retirement became a word whispered in corridors. But for Manny, retirement wasn't just about leaving the ring. It was about finally facing what he had run from for over 2 decades. He began working on a book, a memoir. Something that would tell the real story, not just the victories, but the darkness in between. As he dictated stories to his ghostwriter, he reached the chapter about his childhood. The moment came, the one he had avoided in every interview, every speech. "I saw my father holding another woman's hand," he said aloud. "I didn't know what it meant then, but I knew it meant something bad. I told myself that if I stayed quiet, maybe it would go away." But he left. And I watched my mother suffer, never knowing why. I could have told her, I should have. But I thought it would break her more than the silence. Even as he said it, his throat closed. The shame was old, but fresh. Telling the world was easy now. But telling her, still felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. He went back through old boxes, searching for pieces of the past. In a worn envelope tucked into a Bible, he found a letter he had written as a teenager, but never mailed. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged. It began with, "Ma, I don't want you to hate him, but you deserve to know." He read the letter several times, unsure whether to show it to her. He imagined her reaction 100 different ways: anger, heartbreak, indifference. But not knowing had become its own prison, and he was tired of being brave in every part of his life except this. One night after a long training session, perhaps his last, he sat with Jinky, his wife, and read the letter aloud to her. She listened without speaking. When he finished, she reached for his hand and simply said, "It's time." And he knew she was right. The day he decided to finally tell her, the sky over General Santos was unusually quiet. There were no reporters waiting at the gate, no campaign banners strung over the streets, no cameras trailing his every movement. It was just Manny, a folded letter in his pocket, and a weight he had carried for over 2 decades pressing against his ribs like a final opponent. He arrived at the home he had built for her years ago, a beautiful concrete house far from the bamboo walls of their past, but somehow it always felt smaller when they were alone in it. His mother greeted him with a familiar smile, one laced with concern. She had seen the look in his eyes too many times not to recognize it. Something deep, something unresolved. "Manny," she said, brushing imaginary dust off his shirt, "you look thinner. Are you not eating again before fights?" He smiled weakly. "No fight this time, Ma. I just needed to see you." She blinked at him for a moment, her body pausing in that way only mothers do when they sense a shift in the air, a truth circling just out of reach. She led him to the back porch, the same place where they had sat a dozen times over the years, speaking about everything and nothing. The wind rustled the trees, and somewhere in the distance a rooster crowed. It was the sound of home, and it made everything more difficult. He sat across from her, the letter now a crumpled shape in his hand. She looked at him, waiting. He didn't start with the letter. Instead, he talked about when he was 12. He described the day, how the sun was hot, how the donuts were slightly burned, how she was praying when he left the house. She nodded, remembering, her smile faint but real. Then he said it. "I saw him, Ma." Her eyes locked on his, still not understanding. "I saw Papa," he continued, the words struggling to form, "with another woman. I was on the road near the market. They were holding hands. He saw me. He didn't say anything. He just walked away. That same week he left." Dionysia didn't react at first. She just stared. It was as if the words hadn't landed yet, as if her brain was still unfolding them piece by piece. You saw that?" she whispered. He nodded. "And you never told me?" He shook his head, his voice breaking now. I thought it would hurt you more. I thought if I kept it inside, you wouldn't have to carry that pain. I blamed myself for a long time. I thought maybe if I'd been a better son, he would have stayed. Maybe if I'd said something, I don't know, I didn't want to destroy the only strength we had left, that was you." Her hands trembled slightly, but her face remained unreadable. She looked away, toward the banana trees swaying in the distance. Manny waited, for anger, for heartbreak, for silence, but none of it came in the way he had imagined it. She turned back to him, after what felt like a full minute, eyes shining with unshed tears. "You carried that all this time?" she asked softly. He nodded again, unable to speak. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "Why didn't you ever let me carry it with you?" Manny felt a sob rise in his chest, but he forced it down. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter. The old one, the one he had written in Manila and never sent. He unfolded it slowly and placed it in her lap. She looked down at it, fingers grazing the fragile paper, as if she were touching a piece of his childhood. She read silently, her lips moving ever so slightly. Every line seemed to weigh on her shoulders. Every word was another layer peeled back. When she finished, she didn't cry in the way he expected. She didn't scream or collapse. She simply reached across the table and took his hand in both of hers. "Manny," she said quietly, "you were a child. It was never your job to protect me." He looked down, shame rising again. "You were trying to be strong," she said, voice quivering. "But I would have never blamed you. I would have never let that pain sit inside you for all these years if I'd known." He couldn't hold back anymore. The tears came hard and fast, years' worth of guilt and silence rushing to the surface. She stood, walked around the table and pulled him into her arms, and for the first time since he was a boy, Manny Pacquiao cried in his mother's embrace. Not as a champion, not as a senator, not as a public figure, just as a son, broken open and finally whole. Later that day, they sat together for hours, talking about things they had never said aloud. She told him stories about her own childhood, her own heartbreaks. He told her what it was like sleeping on cardboard in Manila, fighting grown men for pennies, writing letters at night that he hoped she'd never read. It was the most honest conversation they had ever had. That night, Dionysia lit a candle, not for protection, not for prayer, but for peace. She placed it on the small altar and whispered a simple phrase in Visayan, "Wala na, tapos na." It's over now. The next morning, the house felt different. Not brighter, not louder, just lighter. The kind of light that only comes after a storm has finally passed. In the weeks that followed, Dionysia gave a rare interview. The journalist asked about Manny's legacy, his championships, his charity, his influence. But what she said caught everyone off guard. "The greatest thing he ever did," she said, "was not in the ring. It was telling me the truth. He thought he was protecting me, but he was hurting himself. And now, He's free. Manny didn't speak publicly about the moment right away. He didn't need to. He carried himself differently. There was a softness to his voice, a stillness to his eyes, and when asked about his mother, he simply said, "She forgave me before I even spoke." That's what mothers do. The secret that had followed him from childhood no longer had power. It had been shared. It had been forgiven. And with that forgiveness, something unexpected happened. The memory of his father, once filled with resentment, began to fade. Not into something good, but into something neutral, something manageable. The kind of memory that no longer defined him. In his final fight before retirement, Manny stepped into the ring with the same fire he'd always had. But something was different. There was no tension in his shoulders, no weight in his eyes. As the crowd chanted his name and the bell rang, he whispered under his breath the words he had once written in a letter. "Ma, one day I'll tell you." And he had, finally.